The art of meditation is a way of getting in touch with reality. And the reason for it is that most civilized people are out of touch with reality because they confuse the world as it is with the world as they think about it, talk about it, and describe it. For on the one hand, there is the real world, and on the other, a whole system of symbols about that world which we have in our minds. These are very, very useful symbols. All civilization depends on them. But, like all good things, they have their disadvantages, and the principal disadvantage of symbols is that we confuse them with reality, just as we confuse money with actual wealth, and our names, ideas, and images about ourselves with ourselves. Now, of course, reality from a philosopher's point of view is a dangerous word. A philosopher might ask me, what do you mean by reality? Are you talking about the physical world of nature, or a spiritual world, or what? And to that, I have a very simple answer. When we talk about the material world, that's actually a philosophical concept. In the same way, if I say that reality is spiritual, that's also a philosophical concept, and reality itself is not a concept. Reality is gong, and we won't give it a name. Now, it's amazing what doesn't exist in the real world. For example, in the real world, there aren't any things, nor are there any events. That doesn't mean to say that the real world is a perfectly featureless blank. It means that it's a marvelous system of wiggles, in which we describe things and events in the same way as we project images on a Rorschach blot or pick out particular groups of stars in the sky as constellations, as if they were separate groups. Well, they are groups of stars in the mind's eye in our system of concepts, but in reality, they're not grouped like that in the sky. So, in the same way, the difference between myself and the rest of the universe is nothing more than an idea. It is not a real difference. And meditation is the way in which we come to feel our basic inseparability from the whole universe. What that requires is that we shut up. That is to say, we become interiorly silent and cease from the interminable chatter that goes on inside our skulls because, you see, most of us think compulsively all the time. That is to say, we talk to ourselves. I remember when I was a boy, we had a common saying, talking to yourself is the first sign of madness. Now, obviously, if I talk all the time, I don't hear what anyone else has to say. And so, in exactly the same way, if I think all the time, if I talk to myself all the time, I don't have anything to think about except thoughts. And therefore, I'm living entirely in the world of symbols and am never in relationship with reality. Alright, now that's the first basic reason for meditation. But there is another sense, and this is a little bit more difficult to understand. We could say that meditation doesn't have a reason or doesn't have a purpose. And in this respect, it's unlike almost everything else we do, except perhaps making music and dancing. Because when we make music, we don't do it in order to reach a certain point, such as the end of the composition. If that were the purpose of music, to get to the end of the piece, then obviously the fastest players would be the best. And so likewise, when we are dancing, we are not aiming to arrive at a particular place on the floor, as we would be if we were taking a journey. When we dance, the journey itself is the point. When we play music, the playing itself is the point. And exactly the same thing is true in meditation. Meditation is the discovery that the point of life is always arrived at in the immediate moment. And therefore, if you meditate for an ulterior motive, that is, to improve your mind, to improve your character, or to be more efficient in life, you've got your eye on the future and you are not meditating. Because the future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow, there never will be, because time is always now. And that's one of the things we discover when we stop talking to ourselves and stop thinking. We find there is only a present, only an eternal now. So, it's funny then, isn't it, that one meditates for no reason at all except, we could say, for the enjoyment of it. And here I would interpose the essential principle that meditation is supposed to be fun. It's not something you do as a grim duty. The trouble with religion, as we know it, is that it's so mixed up with grim duties. We do it because it's good for you. It's a kind of self-punishment. Whereas meditation, when correctly done, has nothing to do with all that. It's a kind of digging the present. It's a kind of grooving with the eternal now and brings us into a state of peace, where we can understand that the point of life, the place where it's at, is simply here and now. Well, now, in the art of meditation, there are various props or supports. One thing that we are going to use as a means of stilling chatter in the mind is pure sound. And for that reason, it's useful to have a gong. This is a Japanese Buddhist gong made of bronze and shaped like a bowl. If you don't have one of these, you can get the rounded end of an oxygen tank, have a machinist saw it off roughly into the shape of a bowl, and use that. Or you can use your own voice, chanting. Another prop in meditation is the use of incense, and that's because the sense of smell is our repressed sense. And because it's our repressed sense, it has a very powerful influence on us. Therefore, we associate certain smells with certain states of mind, and so the smell of incense is associated with peace and contemplation. So it's advantageous to burn incense in meditation. The other prop is a string of beads. These beads are used in meditation as an unconscious method of timing yourself. Instead of looking at a watch, you move a bead each time you breathe in and out, at a certain rate. You see, there are always 108 beads on a rosary, and when you get to slow breathing, halfway around the rosary is about 40 minutes. That's the usual length of time for which one sits in meditation, because otherwise you get uncomfortable with stiff legs and problems of that kind. Now then, the other thing, first of all, that we have to go into is how does one sit in meditation? You can sit anywhere you want. You can sit in a chair, or you can sit like I'm sitting, which is the Japanese way of sitting, or you can sit in the lotus posture, which is more difficult, with your feet on your thighs, soles upward. The younger you start that in life, the easier you'll find it to do. Or you can just sit cross-legged on a raised cushion above the floor. The point of this is that if you keep your back erect, not stiff, not slumped, but just easily erect, you are centered and easily balanced, and you have a feeling of being thoroughly rooted to the ground. That sort of physical stability is very important for the avoidance of distraction, and generally feeling settled. Water, not disturbed by waves, settles down of itself. A mirror, not covered with dust, is clear and bright. The mind should be like this. When one big cloud passes away, its brightness appears. Happiness must not be so awful. When what disturbs passes away, what happens next comes of itself. At the sound of the bell, now in the silent night, I wake from my dream in this dream world of ours. Gazing at the reflection of the moon in a clear pool, I see beyond my form, my real form. The song of birds, the voices of insects, are all means of conveying truth to the mind. In flowers and grasses we see messages of the Tao, of the way of nature. The scholar, pure and clear of mind, serene and open of heart, should find in everything what nourishes him. Men know how to read printed books. They do not know how to read the unprinted ones. They can play on a stringed harp, but not on a stringless one. Applying themselves to the superficial instead of the profound, how should they understand music or poetry? If you know the insignificance of things, the misty moon of the 5 lakes is all within you. If you understand the activity of human phenomena, the heroism and nobility of the great men of all ages is in your grasp. Walking alone, leaning on a staff in a valley of pine trees, clouds rise around my monkish robes. Sleeping with a book as my pillow by the window beneath the bamboos, I wake when the moonlight steps on the floor. A solitary cloud comes out of the mountain cave. It stays or departs without reference to anything else. The bright mirror of the moon hangs in the sky, aloof from both quietness and clamor. Zen says, when you are hungry, eat. When you are weary, sleep. Poetry aims at the description, in common language, of beautiful scenery. The sublime is contained in the ordinary, the hardest in the easiest. What is self-conscious and ulterior is far from the truth. What is mindless is near. The body is like a boat adrift, floating along or motionless in a deep pool. The mind is like a piece of burnt wood. What matters if it is that feeling has vanished with scented lacquer? Reading the Book of Changes at the morning window, I rub a vermilion stick of ink in the dew that drips from the pine trees. Discussing the sutras with a visitor, the sound of the wooden clapper is borne away on the wind from the bamboos. An ancient worthy says, the shadow of the bamboo sweeps over the stairs, but the dust does not know. The disk of the moon passes through the water of the lake, leaving no trace. One of our Confucians says, the stream rushes down swiftly, but all is silent around. The flowers fall incessantly, but we feel quiet. If you have grasped the meaning of this in all your relationships with things, you are free in mind and body. If your heart is without stormy waves, everywhere are blue mountains and green trees. If our real nature is creative like nature itself. Wherever we may be, we see that all things are free, like sporting fishes and circling kites. When in the mood, I take off my shoes and walk barefooted through the sweet-smelling grasses of the fields, wild birds without fear accompanying me. My heart at one with nature, I loosen my shirt as I sit absorbed beneath the falling petals, while the clouds silently enfold me, as if wishing to keep me there. Just as a whirlwind roaring down a valley leaves nothing behind it, so the ear is to have nothing to do with right and wrong. Just as the moon only reflects its light in a pool, so the mind, empty and unattached, does not know itself from the outside world as two things. When waves reach the sky, those in the boat are aware of the danger, but onlookers tremble with fear. A drunken diner is swearing and cussing at the others, but they pile on regardless, while those outside bite their tongues in apprehension of a quarrel. Thus, with the superior man, his body may be immersed in affairs, but his mind is above and beyond them. Though my tea is not the very best, the pot is never dry. My wine is not exquisite, but the barrel is not empty. My plain lute, though stringless, is always in tune. My short flute, though a simple form, suits me well. Following the Buddhas, adapting ourselves to circumstances, and acting in accord with one's position, these two phrases are the lifebuoys for us to pass over the sea of life. The paths of life are illimitable. If we desire perfection, all kinds of obstacles arise. But if we obey our destiny, we are free everywhere. The following are verses from a book called Zenrin Kushu, verses collected from ancient Chinese and Japanese classics, used by Zen monks to understand the spiritual discipline of the koan, their understanding of ancient dialogues between Zen masters and their disciples. The translation of these verses is by Ruth Saki, from her book Zen Dust, published by Harcourt Brace and World. That cold kills you with cold, but heat kills you with heat. There isn't a piece of tile to cover his head, nor an inch of earth for him to stand on. When the mind wants to speak about it, words fail. When the mind seeks affinity with it, thought vanishes. Sun and moon cannot illuminate it completely. Heaven and earth cannot cover it entirely. Though we are born of the same lineage, we don't die of the same lineage. When we are reviling one another, you may give me tit for tat. When we are spitting at one another, you may spew me with slobber. The deer hunter doesn't see the mountains. The miser doesn't see man. Last year's poverty was not real poverty, but this year's poverty is poverty indeed. The angels find no parts on which to strew flowers. The heretics, secretly spying, find nothing to see. Last year's plum and this year's willow, their color and fragrance are ours of old. At the limits of heaven, the sun rises and the moon sets. Beyond the balustrade, the mountains deepen, and the waters become chilled. He sees only the winding of the stream and the twisting of the path. He does not know that already he is in the land of the immortals. He who would understand the meaning of Buddha nature must wash with the season and the causal relations. Every voice is the voice. Every form is the beautiful. The wild goose has no intention of leaving traces. The water has no thought of engulfing reflections. The instant you speak about a thing, you miss the mark. How can the mountain finch know the wild swans aspiring? The eight-cornered mortar rushes across the sky. The badger and the white bull emit a glorious radiance. With no birds singing, the mountain is yet more still. In the spring beyond time, the withered tree flowers. When the snowy heron stands in the snow, the colors are not the same. A pair of monkeys reach for the moon in the water. When pure gold enters the fire, its color becomes still brighter. Entering fire, he is not burned. Entering water, he is not drowned. A fish that can swallow a boat doesn't swim around in a valley stream. I do not emulate the sages. I do not esteem my own spirit. From the top of the solitary peak, I gaze at the clouds. Close